friends, we're back today to continue with our read aloud read along of Maya Angelou's second memoir, Gathered Together in My Name. We've been reading together chapters of this book as well as we read her first memoir. So if you'd like to start with an earlier chapter or the earlier book, links will be in the description box down below so you can check out those playlists. We're now up to chapter 28, and we've just seen Maya Angelou get herself into a sticky situation that has something to do with prostitution again. So we're about to see what happens next. So like I said, we're at chapter 28. If you have a copy of the book, read along with me. Otherwise, you can just listen to me read chapter 28. My baby's joy at seeing me instantly erased the odor of disinfectant that had clung to the lining of my nostrils. Clara's house and its inhabitants and its visitors were a puff of smoke sliding behind the farthest hill. I paid Big Mary and gave no answers to her blunt questions about my new job. I gathered my son in my arms and told Mary I'd bring him back in the early evening. Ain't you got time for him to spend one night with you? How come you all of a sudden so busy? I couldn't explain the tenderness of a great love. And under no pressures could I confide to her the month I planned to spend at Clara's. She'd simply make the common moral judgment, totally missing the finer point of sacrifice and purpose. The baby, beautiful as a china doll, chattered all the way to the movie house and all the way back to my room. He had picked up Big Mary's run-over shoes accent. I kept repeating the proper pronunciations as he dropped past tenses and plurals. LD was right. I had to try harder. My son needed to be with me. I would read to him every day and get the long-playing albums for children of The Little Prince and The Ugly Duckling. I turned down the path leading to my house, my arms numb to aching with the weight of my son. Home, James! My name ain't no James. My name isn't James. No, your name Mother. Your name is Mother. No, my name ain't no Mother. When I tried to put him down, he folded his legs up under his body and held on to my neck. I'm not going to leave you. His heart was thudding on my shoulder, so I carried him into the house. Rita, the landlord met me in the hall. You got lots of long-distance phone calls from San Francisco. You better call home. I forced the baby's legs and arms from my side and put him on the floor. He set up an alarm of screaming, and I stood at the payphone waiting for someone to answer. Papa Ford accepted my collect call. Girl, I've been trying to get you. Maybe Mother's aim had been good to the extreme and the bail bondsman magic wouldn't work. I would be very little help with my own man in trouble at the same time. Of course, there was no contest. Mother came first. Your mother's in the hospital. My lord, for once she wasn't quick enough. For what? And how is she? My calm voice was a lie. Operation. Pretty serious. She keeps asking for you. You better come home. I took my son back to Big Mary and told her I had to leave town for a few days. Baxters never tell family business to outsiders, so I left her with no explanation, and my son, screaming his motherlessness out, shut up in a back room. I thought about LD, but I had no phone number for him, so I asked the landlord to tell him that I had to go to San Francisco. Trouble in the family. I turned my thoughts with the Greyhound toward San Francisco. My mother's head dipped into the pillow like a yellow rose embedded in a pan of ice. Her forefinger stood sentinel over her red lips. Shh, Bailey's over there. A small figure, semaphore on a chaise lounge in the corner of the hospital room. Eunice died today. He's completely broken up. Today is their 1-year anniversary. I got a sedative for him, so he's been asleep for an hour. Her face and voice showed the strain of worry and illness. How are you? She dismissed her illness. Just a female operation. The things I had removed have been used and I wouldn't be needing them again. She still whispered. I'm glad you came home though. Bailey needs us. I don't think he'll pull through without one of us around. And I'm going to be in the hospital at least a week. Can you take off from your job? Yes, sure could. Try and wake Bailey up and take him to the house. Have you got somebody good taking care of the baby? Yes, Mother. And make him something hot. He hasn't eaten all day, remember? He's the only brother you've got. I sat on the seat beside my only brother and gently shook him. He came out of sleep reluctantly. I called his name and he opened his eyes, sat up, looked around. His eyes found Mother, examined the room, came back to me, stunned. He couldn't grasp who he was or where he was. My? His childhood name for me was nearly a cry. His eyes knew something was very wrong, but for the first seconds couldn't remember. The recall split his face open and tears poured down his cheeks. Oh my God, my, it's Eunice, Steph. Oh my. I took him in my arms and cradle rocked his body. The sounds of Mother's crying mingled with his muffled moans. Let's go home, Bale. Let's just get to the house so we can talk. Let's go home, Bale. He was 8 years old again and trusting. His big, wet black eyes looked at me, wanting to believe I could do something for his grief. I knew I had no magic when he most needed me. Let's go home, Bale. I could hide the shame of my inadequacy in a skillet and drown out his sobs in the rattle of pans. We hugged Mother and they cried together for a moment, but he freed himself without my prodding and came with me to the old, high-ceilinged house, as obedient as a penitent child. Grief works its way on people differently. Some sulk, or become morose, or weep and scream of vengeance at the gods. Bailey cried for 2 hours. Unintelligible human sounds growled and gurgled from his throat. Then his face was dry, all tears wasted, and he began to talk. He ate the food I gave him, automatically, greedily, never stopping or slowing the string of chatter that ran from his mouth. He told me about Eunice's illness, double pneumonia and tuberculosis, the details of her treatment, the small talk of their sick room visits. His voice didn't lower and become dramatic when he related how she began to fail. He spoke of the nurse, new on the floor, who barred his way to Eunice's room. Mrs. Johnson. Oh, she died this morning. They've taken her away. He rattled about his new tennis rackets and the better courts in San Francisco, the Southern Pacific dining cars, and how hot Arizona was. I let him talk and didn't try to answer. By morning, he began to run down and finally noticed that he was repeating himself. Oh my, I told you about that, didn't I? He drew words around as protection against his news. I gave him a sleeping pill. My, you're not leaving me, are you? No. He balled himself up in Mother's bed and was asleep in minutes. I awakened to the splash of water and the sound of Bailey singing in the bathroom. Jelly, 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 jelly stays on my mind. He could imitate the bass baritone of Billy Eckstine. Jelly roll killed my papi, ran my mommy stone blind. His voice rolled over joyously in waves. My instant response of elation lasted seconds. He couldn't have made such a quick adjustment. I joined Papa at the kitchen table and waited. Hey Maya, fresh coffee. Good morning, Papa Ford. His face was no wider than my outstretched hand, and the usual rich brown color was dusty like an old chocolate bar exposed to the light. A smile struggled free and limped across his lips. Boy, I sure was upset last night. I hope I didn't worry you too much. And Mom, God, that was inconsiderate of me to go to her hospital room screaming and crying. It wasn't inconsiderate, Bale. You were upset. You went to your mother. Where else could you go? Yes, but she's sick herself, and after all, I'm a man. A man takes his knocks. He doesn't go running to his mother. He poured coffee and drank standing, refusing the chair I pulled out for him. Shall I make breakfast for you? His grin was a little scary, something more than impish and not yet satanic. I've learned how to make eggs Benedict. He turned to Papa. Papa, can you make eggs Benedict? That's what rich white people eat. Papa growled. I never cook for white folks, rich or not. Bailey poked in the refrigerator and took out eggs and bacon. He nearly ran to the kitchen closet and was back in a flash with pots, pans, skillets. I'll cook for you, Bailey, not knowing how to console him. I think you need turkey and ham for eggs Benedict. He turned on me in red anger. Will you please leave me alone? I'm no invalid. I wasn't the one who died, you know. I liked it better when he cried. I could pet him and talk softly and feel as if I were effectively coping with his grief. I'm Cuban Pete, he started singing in a bad Latin accent. Oh, I'm Cuban Pete. He Cesar Romero'd around the table to the sink, over to the stove, his grin awful. In a few minutes, he placed burned bacon, scrambled eggs, and lopsided stacks of hotcakes on the table. Get your own silverware. I'm the chef. I'm not the waiter. He straightened up the pancakes with his hands and broke off the ragged edges, trying desperately to make them uniform. Sit down. I'll get your plate, Bailey. I'm not going to eat right now, but you all enjoy yourself. Bon appetit. He walked out of the kitchen. I want to hear some music. In moments, the sound of water splashing in the bathtub mixed with Lester Young's mellow sax reached the kitchen. Papa Ford frowned. He's had one bath today, ain't he? He ain't dirty enough for 2 baths. There's nothing wrong with him, he's just nervous. I slammed the sentence out, a barrier against further conversation. In 2 days, Bailey lost pounds from his already skinny frame and gained in degrees of deception. Only once did we speak of Eunice. If I could have afforded it, I'd have taken her out of San Francisco General and put her in St. Joseph's. People lie who say you die when it's your time to die. He quoted Robert Benton, his favorite at the time. Hate can be legislated too. He opened his face by dint of will. I want a favor. Anything. Eunice's funeral is tomorrow. After that, I never want to hear her name again. He waited. All right, Bailey. Thank you, Mai. He closed in upon himself and smiled the new grimace. I lost part of my brother forever. I didn't report to Mother that the next morning he put on fresh white tennis shorts and shirt, thick white socks and tennis shoes, and walked into the church carrying his new tennis racket. Papa Ford frowned his disapproval. Your brother sounds crazy to me. He said he's going to quit his job. This ain't no time to leave the road. Get his meals free, tips. He can bring home butter and stuff, can't he? Black men ain't got but 2 outs now as I see it. Keep on sleeping with old lady Southern Pacific or start sleeping in the streets. He smirked. And he crazy, but he ain't crazy enough for the streets. Shoot, he remind me of them Jew boys. He's smart like them. But them Jew boys get some backing to open up some kind of little business. That's how they get their start. Any kind of business he try to start going to be against the law, and he have to be sharper than mosquito mess too. Keep out of jail. He better stay on the road. Bailey started staying out all night long, and when he came in, his eyelids were puffy and his movements slow. He walked in, pushing before him an odor of unwashed clothes. His eyes were half shut on his secrets. In the afternoons, Bobby Wentworth, a former schoolmate now unrecognizable in his thinness and color change, came to the house. He went into Bailey's bedroom, walking like a defeated old man, and closed the door. One morning, I stood in his empty room over the unmade bed and wondered how I could save my brother. If LV and I married soon, he would get us a house large enough for Bailey to have a room. I would nurse him back to health and buy him books and records. Maybe he'd like to go back to school and study law. With his quick brain and silver tongue, he'd be an ace criminal lawyer. I thought of Grandmother Henderson, who prayed every tribulation into manageable size. I prayed. Around noon, Bailey came home, the unslept night dragging his shoulders down. I faced him in the hall. Bailey, what's the matter with little Bobby? His tired face tried to shut me out. Nothing's the matter with him. Why? He's about the color of mustard and he's got so thin. He's just getting down to his fighting weight. Anyway, when are you going back to Stockton? How long can you take off from your job? I wasn't sure how much I should tell him. I'll stay till Mother comes out of the hospital. Why? Well, I want to be with you. I don't need anything. I have told you I'm not an invalid. You better get back to Stockton and take care of your own business. It was an order. I wanted to be sure about his future before I left. Papa Ford says you're going to quit your job. Not going to. I did. But what will you do to live? I'll live. He wasn't bragging, just making a statement. But Bailey, it pays well, doesn't it? Pretty well. You're not the one to talk to me about slinging hash. You might be a fry cook the rest of your life if you're that stupid, but not me. I refuse to bear the insult. I'm not cooking now, if you want to know. I'm working in a house on the outskirts of Sacramento. A what? He sat up and leaned over to me. Doing what? I knew I had gone too far. I was a boulder rolling down a steep hill and couldn't stop myself. What do women do in houses? The best defense was to be uppity. You silly ass, you silly little ass. Turning tricks, huh? My baby sister? His new temper was cold and snaring. His rages used to be full of fire and crackling. Now his diction sharpened and his neck was stiff and he looked down his nose at me. Who's the man? Bailey, it's not like you think. Who is the smartass man who turned you out? Bailey, he's in trouble and I'm just helping him for a month. What's his name? Although he continued sneering, he seemed to thaw a little. Tell me his name. L.D. Tolbrook. And he's old. How old? About 45. What kind of drugs has he given you? You don't understand. He's even stopped me from smoking pot. He's straight and no pot. And then it's a matter of time before he gives you a nose full of cocaine. Bailey. I couldn't bear Bailey's thinking evil about LD. He's a gambler and he's in trouble with the big boys, so I offered to help him for a month. Then we're going to be married. He leaned into me and spoke gray steel. You're not going to get married. Yes, I am. Yes. I'll tell you what you're going to do. You are going to go to Stockton and get your baby. Then you're going to find LD. You're going to tell him he's not to worry about the big boys anymore, that he can start worrying about one little boy, just one, and tell him how little I am. Also, tell him that you are my baby sister. Then you're going to get back on the bus and come home. Is that clear, Marguerite? I knew the old Bailey could be as violent as mother, and this new one seemed even more lethal. Clear? Yes. That was all I could say. When I arrived in Stockton, I could explain to LD that Bailey had misunderstood everything, so for a while, I'd go back to San Francisco. When Bailey cooled down, I'd return to him. My absence would make him fonder, and I'd have more chance to help my brother pull himself together. Bailey gave me money for the round trip and to pay the babysitter. I took the afternoon bus to Stockton. You're going to want to come back for chapter 29, so thank you so much for watching this video. Leave me a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time, happy reading!